Alright, so in this video, this is the last one I'm going to do for now. We're going to talk about input. So before we talked about printing things, which is fun. We can print words. But really, programs, for the most part, need some kind of input or they're just not that interesting. I mean, think about it. Games get input. Sometimes it's mouse, sometimes it's keyboard, sometimes it's joystick, but there's input. Most programs are going to ask questions or do things like that, especially in Python, which is console based, so it's text based. We need to get input from our user, and it's really easy to get input from our user. There's a statement called input, and just like the alert or the prompt statement in JavaScript, it's input, and then inside the parentheses and inside quotation marks we have our input, like hi, what is your name? And as you know, if I wanted to say hi, what is your name, then I need to put hi, what is your name in quotation marks to make it a string. If you watch the last video, you'll know that if I don't have quotation marks, it's just flat out wrong and it's not going to work. So it's easy to do that. You want to take information from the user, use input. So look at that. So it's asking me my name, and I could type something in, and I hit enter, and it prints out hello there, Joe. Well, why does it do that? Well, because why does it do that? No, it prints out hello. Interesting. That was a weird leftover from the last video, I think. Yeah, there we go. So, don't know why that happened there. But anyway, I must have hit Control V or something. I don't know. So, anyway, back to this. It took input. And you'll notice that when we get to these three arrows here, that means we're at what's called a command prompt. That means that we are ready to take, the program's done. Okay? There's no program running anymore. It's waiting for a command or for another program to run. And you'll notice that when I run this program, it stops and there's not those little arrows. That's because the program is running. The program has gotten to this input line. It's asking me for my name. I type in my name. Once I type in my name, it moves on to the next line of code, which is to print out the word hello. And then the program's over because there's nothing left. There's no more lines of code to run. So what happened to my name? Well, nothing happened to my name. It got forgotten because we can almost never use an input statement without assigning the input to a variable. And here's what I mean by that. When I type in my name and hit enter, my name's not Joe, but when I type in a name and hit enter, it comes back to Python, and Python wants to save it. But Python doesn't know where to put it, so I have to tell Python, hey, take what that user just typed in and save it to the variable, and we'll use X in this case. Now Python can do something with it because now it's saved. So if I type in Joe, as far as Python is concerned, it looks just like that. Python converted that input to a string, and there we are. Now I could use it for something. So I could say print hello, comma X, and if you remember, the comma just puts strings together, puts a space in between them. So now if I were to run that, it's going to ask me for my name, and I enter my name and it says hello, and then whatever I typed in as my name. All there is to it. You're almost never going to see this. You're almost never going to see input without X equals or whatever your variable name equals. Because if you have this, you're wasting everybody's time because it's not going to save this. You can't use it for anything. So you've got to set it equal to something. Remember, you're almost never going to start a line with the word input. It's almost always going to start with something equals input. All right. And again, from the last video, if you wanted to ask a specific set of words, you put them inside the parentheses and inside quotation marks. That makes them a string, and you can ask for strings. Now, one really important point, and if you didn't watch the variables video before, you need to make sure you understood all of the content in there. And if what I say next doesn't make sense, you need to go back and watch that video again. One thing that's really important is you have to remember that anytime you take input from a user, it initially gets stored as a string. Here's what I mean. If I say, give me a number, and I run this, and the user puts in the number 4 and hits enter, it thinks that that user typed in a word. And it thinks that particular word is 4, but here's what Python sees. This is what Python thinks we have. Okay? There's actually a way to look at the variable type. I'm going to say, tell me the type of the variable that X is, and I'm going to run this. Give me a number. I'm going to say 5. And see, it says it's a string. Okay, so it thinks that that 5 is a string. Why should you care, you ask? Well, here's why. Because what I cannot do is, I can't just print X divided by 3, for example. Okay, so if I try to run this, it's going to tell me that it can't divide a string and an integer. All right, so a lot of times we just need a word, we just need a name or something like that, but sometimes we want to use the number that they gave us in math. And there's an easy way to do that, and it's called type conversion or casting. So what we do is we're going to pick another variable for now, and we're going to say y equals int x. What this does is this says take the value of x, and if it can be converted to an integer, if it looks like an integer, then we're going to make it into one. All right, so if the user gives us a 6, it's going to do the math for us. It's going to convert it, and it's going to be able to use it in math. Now, problem is, and we'll learn how to deal with this at a later date, but what if the user types in 6, the word 6 instead of the number 6? Well, I get an error, and what it's telling me is it cannot convert the word 6 into an integer because it doesn't look like one, and it doesn't know how to do that. So when we take input from a user, we've got to remember that if we want to use it in math, it's got to be converted, and you can convert it to an int, an integer, or we can actually convert it to a float. Either way, it's going to get converted and do math, unless it just can't be, unless they give us something that's not a number. And there's a fix for that, but don't worry about that now. For now, we'll assume our users are good little boys and girls and give us the kinds of numbers we want, and they can be converted. So this is how we take input. So when I give you an assignment that says, I'm going to give you an example. Take a number from the user, and then take the user's name. Oops, got my quotation mark there. And take the user's name. And then print out the user's name, which is y, times the number that the user gave you. Now this is the one exception where you can actually multiply an integer times a string. And if you remember from the last assignment, what it does is it's going to print out the name multiple times. So if I give the number 64, it's going to type out whatever name they gave us 64 times. But it's not actually yet. It's going to give us an error right now. Why is it going to give us an error, you ask? Well, because if I give it a number like 4, and I give it my name, it says I can't multiply a non-integer times a string. So what do I have to do? Well, here's where I want to convert that number to an integer. And last time I converted it to a new variable, but I'm just going to do that. And this is something you'll see a lot, where you take a variable, you do something to it, and then you save it right back to that variable. And what this looks like to Python is that you have x equals 4, and you're going to turn it into x equals 4 as an integer. That's what this line does. I'm just saying replace what's currently in x, replace this with this. So this started out as the string 4. Whoops, I lost it. And it turned into the integer 4. Okay, so that's basically what that line of code does. So now I'm going to run this again. And I'm going to say, give me a number. Oh, let's say 2,345. What is your name? Batman. And yeah, I shouldn't have done that many, because one thing that idle will do is, if it's a whole bunch of lines repeated, it'll shorten it for you. But there's what it actually came out looking like. So that's all there is to it. So today, you're probably going to get an assignment where you take numbers from a user and you're going to use them in math. And you're going to have to remember they have to be converted. By the way, there's one little trick about converting things to an integer, and let me show you that real quick. And again, there's a fix for this, but I'm not going to show it to you now. So let's say that they give you a number like, let's say we're doing math, not printing out names a whole bunch of times, but let's say they give you the number 4.6. And we convert it to an integer, and then we print it out. Even though it looks like a number, it's not going to convert it, because it's saying, hey, you know, I don't want you to be confused. I don't want to just chop off that 0.6, so I'm not going to let you do that. If you think that your users, if you need decimal places, or you think your user's going to get them, you can do that. You can convert it to a float. And in that case, if the user gives you something like 3.4, it converted it to a float, and you can use it. All right, so that's input, that's type conversion, and that's all for now.